remember when I was getting in the Navy, I started training at the gym, and I think to get excellent, I mean, there's tiers of for sit-ups. It was 88 in 2 minutes or something for my age. I forget. And you got to go. It's got to be a formal sit-up, not one of these like do with your brother kind of deals.
Yes, sir. They're pretty strict on that.
I thought that I can do that, no problem. I got to like 50 or 60 something, and it cramped. My ab cramped. I don't know if you ever had one of those, but I mean,
yes,
it's hard to undo. So
I feel like your appendix is bursting.
Yeah. So I'm on the ground at 5 a.m. at the gym, and it looks like I'm seizing. And my buddies walk up, "Are you all right?" I said, "Yeah, I have an abdominal cramp." And immediately it turned into, "Hey, come look how funny this looks." They went from concern to make fun of like that.
Welcome to Under the Knife, the podcast where we cut into topics such as politics, life advice, and medicine, and we do this with the precision of a licensed orthopedic surgeon. I'm your host, Dr. Craig Green, an orthopedic surgeon and elected public official.
Good morning, Nick. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, sir. Thanks for having me. It's
You bet.
honored to be here.
Well, look, I was going to call this Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Hadley, but I think she might get a little upset. So we just won't call it anything.
Miss Kristen actually told me you were going to say that.
I don't think Hadley
And
knows
Hadley
yet.
said, absolutely not. You better not.
Well, just wait. I think the life and the liberty part might be a little easier than the
Yes,
pursuit
sir.
of Hadley part. We'll see.
Depends on who you ask.
That's right. So look, tell everybody what you're into right now. I think it's pretty fascinating.
Right now, in May, I graduated from the University of Southern California, and the day after I graduated, I commissioned into the United States Navy, and I'm currently at flight school right now, trying to earn my wings of gold too.
So that makes you an ensign?
Yes, sir.
And did you have to go to boot camp, or how did that work?
Kinda. So before I started college, they actually started a program. I was the first like guinea pig year, and they sent every single person go on scholarship with the Navy. So if the Navy was paying for your college, you would have to go to a 4-week boot camp in Great Lakes, which is the same place where if you enlist in the Navy, that's where you go to boot camp as well.
So you did that in high school?
After my senior year of high school,
Wow.
yes, sir.
So what gave birth to I want to be in the Navy? In high school, how did you decide that?
It's actually kind of a funny story. So when I was super little, we can make a long answer, but when I was super little, I used
Let's
to...
go short story long.
Short story long?
Yeah.
Okay, I can do that. So when I was little, I used to go to the Philippines with my parents, and my mom would always like tell us the importance of service. I don't think she knew this, but she was kind of planting that whole Navy thing in my head. But I've always wanted to go to college. Then when I was applying for colleges, on the application, it said, "Are you considering an ROTC scholarship?" And I had no idea what that was, but my college counselor actually had a son who was doing ROTC, and she told me all about it. And I was like, well, if I can go to college and serve, that might be the best path for me. And
Wow.
so
And you were probably 17, 18?
17, yes, sir.
Wow. So were there other 17-year-olds at the boot camps between senior?
Yes, so there was about 800 17, 18-year-olds after you graduate. So everyone who's going to, it's actually funny. It's super small Navy. Navy's a giant organization, but they always say small Navy because you always see the same people. And the people that I'm living with right now, out of complete chance, I all went to boot camp with a few years ago. So
And what's the attrition rate from the high school to where you are now?
about 10%.
Really?
It's not too bad. It's mostly, it kind of weeds out the people who join the Navy for the free college. But I don't see anything wrong with that, but you have to want it a little bit more.
Now you had the ROTC, did that give you an extra, because USC is hard to get into. Is that a route into USC, or is it completely separate?
No one actually knows.
Really?
But I think it probably helped a little bit.
Helps a little bit.
But you do have to get into, because sometimes USC admissions comes out first.
Gotcha.
So you did get into the school, but USC, I don't think USC actually asked for whether or not you're applying for ROTC, but I do know that the ROTC unit that I was a part of asked, or probably communicates with admissions, letting them know these are the people that we thought were good enough to be in our program, and we'd like you guys to think the same.
Now, and so you knew the commitment that would be there in college and beyond when you signed up at 17, 18 years old.
Yes, sir. So it's a great program. I would consider every every person applying to college to consider it, but they actually give you a year to decide.
Really?
So you can get your college paid for the entire first year, and then once you step foot on campus that second year, then you're locked in
You're
for
done.
your commitment.
You're done. Well, speaking of commitment, and I sort of think that our society would have fewer problems if we had a conscription service, almost like Israel or something, where everybody had to serve.
I was thinking that too.
Yeah.
I think me being in ROTC in college and just being in the Navy in general, I've seen the most amount of growth in my life. I know college is it's a very formative time of your life, but just being in the Navy, and it really teaches you a lot about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
What did you learn about Nick?
I think the biggest thing is how to work with my time, and you kind of realize how valuable time is when you're doing 18 to 20 college credit hours, and ROTC actually makes you do engineering. So 18 to 20 engineering credit hours. And then on top of that, you got to wake up at 5 a.m. to work out every day and then do leadership exercises and all that. So you kind of have to figure out, do I want to value time with friends after class, or do I want to value time with clubs, or do I just want to sleep? So I think just learning how to prioritize and
Did you
work
sleep?
with your time. No, sir.
You sleep now?
No,
Not
I
really.
sleep less now.
Yeah. Well, I have a saying, or someone told me a saying once. If you have a plate of bacon and eggs, I think my wife made some eggs this morning, right?
Yes, sir. She made me a breakfast burrito. It was delicious.
I'm glad you were here. We got breakfast burritos. So if you have a plate of bacon and eggs and you think, well, how did that get there? Well, from the chicken and the pig. And the chicken was involved, but the pig was committed. And you took the committed route of college. And so, I had a guy share with me once. I was on the football team in college. Same thing, workouts in the morning, tutoring, all that. And a buddy of mine told me once he was interviewing people to become orthopedic surgeons. So they're graduating medical school, and he had 300 applicants. He would pick 30 to interview out of the 300 and choose 3.
Wow.
And I said, how do you pick? On the first round, how do you cut it from 300 to 30? And he said, I look and see if they were in like ROTC or played college sports or did something extra when it was the only time in life where they could have chosen to do less. So I think it definitely sets you apart, but I think more than anything, like you mentioned, it formed habits of excellence and commitment to something, right? And that something may change. Right now, it's not engineering, and maybe it is a kind of engineering. Tell everybody what you're doing now.
I'm at flight school right now, so I actually do have a lot of engineering concepts while I'm learning in aerodynamics and stuff. So it was good that I paid attention in physics, I think.
And you're top 2 in your class, right?
Yes, sir. Currently, I'm second.
What's the goal?
Right now, the goal would be to fly in jets. I think the EA-18 Growler is the mission set that I want to be a part of. And for those that don't know, it's a jet. So there's 2 types of jets in the Navy. There's the F-18 and the EA-18. The F is a fighter, and the EA is an electronic attack. So the jet jams radars of enemy systems and all that jazz. And I think it's absolutely spectacular.
Pretty amazing.
Yes, sir.
But that's still you in the jet. Oh, it's not you in a drone thing.
No, sir.
Nice. Where do you think that's heading?
China.
But I mean, do you think aeronautical warfare is heading towards that, or there'll always be
100%. I think that everything's kind of moving automated. So I think right now you have the front seater and the back seater, and then I think that the Naval Flight Officer in the back seat is going to eliminate it within the next 10 years because of I think there's a lot less repercussions if there's only one person in the plane, and the person who's fighting the plane is actually on the ground. And then I think past that, I think even the pilot will probably end up being on the ground later, and they'll just be drones completely. So I think that's the way that the Navy's moving.
The training that you're getting, could you also eventually possibly do that from remotely?
No, sir. Definitely not.
2 different skill sets.
Yes,
So
sir.
currently the 2 people, there's the pilot's just flying the plane.
Wait, say that again?
There's 2 people in these planes.
Yes, sir.
So tell us what the front and the back one did.
So the front seater right now is called the naval aviator or a pilot, and they are solely in charge of controlling the stick of the plane. And then the naval flight officer in the back, Goose in Top Gun, he's in charge of fighting the plane. So on an F-18, he's in charge of weapon systems, navigating. If you're on E-2, which is it's a turboprop with a satellite dish on top, they're in charge of leading the entire fighter mission. So they'll actually be the first off the carrier, and they'll be directing where all of the planes are going to be going, and so they're the mission commander. So that's what the NFOs do on that. And then on the P-8 Poseidon, you have the pilots flying the plane, and then the P-8, the NFOs in the back are actually hunting submarines.
So are the NFOs pilots or no?
They do learn a lot of. So I'm actually an NFO. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know that.
So I am an NFO, and so
is that by virtue of the ROTC training, or you've already picked that up?
That's what I picked.
Okay.
And so you do learn how to fly the plane.
So that's what you will be at the end of your training.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'll be a Naval Flight Officer. So you learn how to fly the plane, and then once you get to the primary portion of flight school, that's when you start transitioning to you learning to fly the plane and also the weapon systems of each plane.
Strategery.
Yes, sir. Strategery.
Well, you got to see a broader picture for that, right?
Yes, sir.
And you probably now, so you'll be landing and taking off from carriers?
Depending on the plane, but yes, sir.
That'll be a rush the first time. Huh?
I've heard crazy things. They actually send you on exposures to different communities. And when I was on an aviation, or I've had friends who went on in jet squadrons, and they said their first flight in a jet, they were sore for two weeks afterwards.
Really?
Yes, sir.
How many G's? Like, is it?
A lot. So every single person has to go through the G chamber, and I don't know if you ever seen those videos on the internet, but they put people basically in a chamber, and they just compress G's on you, and your face basically just melts off, and people pass out. You gotta learn how to do the Hick maneuver and breathe. The new Top Gun movie did a great job of displaying it, but with the breathing exercise to keep all the blood in the right places.
Have you started any of that?
They very low level stuff, but once I do finish my first flight phase, they do send you through physio, and you learn all of that.
Now, the physical requirements started all the way back to college, right?
Yes. Oh, it actually started in high school, because when you're applying for the scholarship, you have to be within the limits of the Navy.
What are those for NFO?
For it's actually the same across the entire Navy, and it's to be competitive. It's like 97 push-ups.
So many sit-ups in 2 minutes.
They actually changed it to a plank. They said it's better better for your back, but 3.5 minute plank, and then mile run in 8.5 minutes, 9 minutes.
I remember when I was getting in the Navy, I started training at the gym, and I think to get excellent, I mean, there's tiers of for sit-ups. It was 88 in 2 minutes or something for my age, I forget. and you got to go, it's got to be a formal sit-up, not one of these like do with your brother kind of deals.
Yes, sir. They're pretty strict on that.
I thought that I can do that, no problem. And I got to like 50 or 60 something, and it cramped. My ab cramped. I don't know if you ever had one of those, but I mean,
yes,
it's
sir,
hard to undo. So
I feel like your appendix is bursting.
Yeah. So I'm on the ground at 5 a.m. at the gym, and it looks like I'm seizing. And my buddies walk up, "Are you all right?" I said, "Yeah, I have an abdominal cramp." And immediately it turned into, "Hey, come look how funny this looks." They went from concern to make fun of like that. But it is harder than you think. So, and how often do you do the MRF?
The MRF? Probably more often than you'd think. I think of the MRF as kind of a lazy exercise. If I don't want to drive to the gym, I'll do one at home.
Tell everybody what the MRF is.
The MRF is a exercise developed by Lieutenant Michael Murphy, who was one of the lives that were lost in Operation Red Wings. If you saw the movie The Lone Survivor, he was the mission commander for that. And he created a workout that's pretty big in the SEAL community. That's 100 or 300 squats, 200 push-ups, and 100 sit-ups, and then a mile run before and after that.
And it's timed, right?
It's completely timed and weighted.
And there's like in the community, it's posted and stuff, right? There's competitions.
Yes, sir. They have the Navy's pretty fun with that. There's always friendly competition with various physical activities like that.
Well, I'm a big believer that competition breeds excellence. So I mean, the guys that you're in these classes with, I mean, you're kind of shooting for some similar things, right?
It's a hilarious dynamic because in flight school, they actually post your scores in the middle of the hallway. So everyone knows how
Name
you're doing.
everything.
Yes, sir. So everyone knows how you're doing. And you're kind of, if there's people in front of you, people behind you, and so you kind of know who's gunning for you and who you need to strive towards. So
you're on the same team, but you're shooting for the starting quarterback.
Exactly. Because a lot of people want to fly jets, and if you want to fly jets, you got to be the best.
Got to be the best. If you could like step outside of yourself and say, okay, what 2 or 3 things fueled you getting to where you are?
I think a lot of it just revolves around my faith. In college, I think that once I started focusing on my faith a bit more and prioritizing that, everything kind of fell into place. And I think whether you're religious or not, it's important to have values like that, and it kind of it guides your goals basically. And I think
shapes them probably.
Yes, sir. So I think that just me aligning my goals with my faith and really like keeping God at the center of all those, and I think that's really been super formative for me.
It's probably an iterative and constant process too, right?
Yes, sir. I think there's a term that was told to me called magnanimity, and doing the small things with great amount of heart. I think that's really important because everyone wants to change the world. Everyone wants to save the world. I think, especially in the Navy, everyone's like, oh, I'm doing a very good thing. I want to save the world. But how are you going to do that? And it's about the little things. And you got to focus on those little things. So like with faith, everyone's like, oh, I want to be this big believer and I want to make it where you want to make it to heaven or whatever your religion is. But I think you got to focus on the little things. You got to focus on prayer. You got to focus on
daily habits.
Yes, sir. Exactly. So focus on those little things. And outside of faith, you got to set goals and you got to figure out what are the short things. It's like a 40-year plan. It's like what can I focus on now and what can I focus on 10 months from now and what can I focus 10 years from now.
You know what that reminds me of is I was with my mentor this week, and a lot in our society is centered in conversation and relationships and just interaction around what do you do. And I really think that's the wrong question. I think that the question we should be asking is, who are you? Yes, and I think the reason we don't is because a lot of people cannot answer that themselves. And the hard part is that in our society, most of the time, what we do determines who we are. And instead, who we are should determine what we do.
Yes, sir.
And that's kind of what you're getting at, is it was your faith that led to what you're going to do and probably still fuels that in a lot of ways.
Yes, sir.
And you mentioned small things. One of my mottos in life I picked up from a buddy in business school is attention to detail is the primary fabric of excellence. So I think one is execution in what you do, and one is figuring out who you are, the magnanimity. Did I say that right?
Yes, sir.
Because if you can figure out that one, then you can see the better picture.
Yes, sir.
The other thing the guy shared with me is he read this book from, I think, some Eastern author. He only wrote one book, but the centering around this concept was asking the question, who am I? But don't come up with words. Just try to feel, who am I? And let that be
it's a loaded question.
10, 20-minute session of, okay, I need to feel, where do I feel that? How do I feel that? Does it make me feel anxious, proud, whatever? But that's, if you can do that daily, then it kind of helps to form it.
Yes, sir. I think that attention to detail thing is huge.
It's big.
I didn't realize that until I got to flight school. Because in high school and even a little bit less in college, but you're given a textbook and you're like, okay, this is what you need to know. In college, you're given a textbook and it gets a little bit broader. But in flight school, when you're learning about the components of an airplane, they give you a 200-page, they call it a NATOPS. And they basically tell you to memorize it front to back. And if you don't, that could mean life or death. And you're kind of seeing that now on the tests because they're asking you about one small screw, one small bolt on the plane on where it is and why is it there. And you're just like, what the heck? How was I supposed to know that?
Yeah, it's in there. And
Yes,
that's weeding out the people who know and don't know.
Yes, sir.
Well, and two, so do you find that same faith is what drives you now in difficult training periods?
100%.
You got to draw back to that, right?
You always have to fall back on that. Whether it's faith or whether it's training, I think the Navy's in a peacetime right now, more or less, and every single admiral who comes speak to us tells us how important training is, and it's because you fall back on your training in times of great stress. So although it's super monotonous, like in the fleet, I was on a guided missile destroyer out of Pearl Harbor after my sophomore year in college, and all the training seemed very monotonous and everyone wasn't motivated towards it, but the CO was always telling guys like, hey, we're going to war soon, or we may see war in the next few years. You guys need to focus on this training, because when it's go time, if you didn't take training seriously, then we're toast.
My takeaway from my time in the Navy was you got to be ready at moment's notice. I mean, the whole Navy needs to.
Yes, sir. I think Hadley's kind of seeing that now too. When one day I'm in LA living next to her in USC, and the next day I'm in Pensacola when we were both expecting to be there a little bit longer.
Right. I think she's also learning why you can't text back right away sometimes.
Yeah, she's still learning that one.
Learning curve. So if you had to speak to the junior and high school version of yourself, or say my son Gabe, or knowing that you probably wouldn't take heed everything that that person was telling you, what would you tell him right now?
Steel sharpens steel. I think freshman year I didn't realize how important it was to surround yourself with like-minded individuals. It wasn't until I really found my solidified friend group where I'm like, wow, it's really special how every single person around me is driven, and that really drives you to work hard as well. So every single one of my roommates in college is doing amazing things right now, and I think that they are a big contributor to why I wanted to work hard as well. Because when you see your roommates waking up to go to the gym, even though they're not in ROTC at 5 a.m, you're like, wow, like,
I better get up.
I got no excuse either. And when you see, I lived with a bunch of engineers too, and when you see them studying until 1 a.m, it hurts a little bit less.
Mm-hmm. Same with faith too. I mean,
yes, sir.
My mom always taught me, you become like those you're around, so surround yourself like people you want to be like, or better, so that you're even getting better.
Yes, sir.
Aren't some of those guys at our house right now?
Yes, sir. Right. One of them is one of my college roommates is there, and he was he's actually an explosive ordnance disposal. That's a special operations command in the Navy, and when he was training to go to their it's like a tryout basically. It's like so for SEALs they go to the SEAL officer assessment screener, and then for EODs they do a similar thing. And when he was training for that, you could tell he was struggling a little bit, just trying to find the motivation to wake up and swim. They do a lot of swimming, and so I actually started doing the workouts with him, and you could see that drove him a little bit harder, and it was great for me because when I got to flight school and they're like, hey, we need you to swim a mile, I'm like, oh, well, there we go. I've been doing that with Bryce.
Yeah. Well, and little did you know, this is one of the things I picked up along the way too, is that you get to a certain challenge in life, and little did you know that every little challenge that you've had in life that made you sharper and stronger prepared you for that day, and you're ready.
Yes, sir.
And then, so what about where along the way did faith become important to you?
I would say my sophomore year of college. My freshman year, you kind of go into college. Some people will be like, "Oh, I'm excited to have this freedom finally, and I'm excited to party and do all this stuff." And some people are like, "Oh, I'm going to college to study," and I was probably somewhere in the middle.
Good mixture.
I had some strict parents growing up, and I was excited to experience something different and have that freedom. And I was there to study. I knew that I needed to work hard to get my engineering degree. So I kind of focused on those two things, and it wasn't until my junior year my sophomore year when I kind of realized, hey, like, faith is a very important thing, and
was faith important to you growing up?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
It was, or at least I thought it was, but looking back on it, I don't know if I actually prioritized it as much as I told myself when I was in high school.
Well, I mean, as much as you can in high school. I know as a parent, and Hadley's really good at this, our goal is that for our children, their faith becomes their own.
And I think that's extremely important.
Should happen in college.
That's where it does typically happen, but the problem is some people will grow up where their parents force their faith on them, and they really stray away from that. It's just human inclination to stray away from things that are forced on you. And when you get to college and you kind of get that freedom, that's when you kind of find yourself. So when I initially got that freedom, I was like, okay, I don't have to go to church every Sunday now. And my mom's not in my ear asking me about it. But then when you actually step into your faith and find yourself in that sense with that freedom, I think that's when you start. I always tell people that I walked with God when I was growing up, but I feel like I'm actually running now.
One of my goals at the end of my life, and I get to see it now as my dad's kind of entering that phase, is, I hope that when I'm done and gone, people can realize like that guy walked with the Lord and knew him, and so that's a day-to-day deal too. I
think that's really important. A big thing that I helped lead a Bible study when I was in college, and a big thing that I always tell people is, we go to USC, not a lot of people here are going to believe the same things that you believe, but you can show them the Lord, you can show them faith even if they don't know it, because being a Christian is all about the content of your heart, and people can see that light whether or not they know the Lord. So I think that's really important.
Well, it's like the missionary said, wherever you go, whatever you do, preach the gospel, and when necessary, use words. It's how you live your life.
Yes, sir.
Then people maybe take interest. Well, man, look, thanks for being on.
Thank you so much.
You're an inspiration to me and to so many around you.
Likewise.
So just like it's the little things, just keep going one day at a time, one foot in front of the other. Breathe in, breathe out, and I can't wait to see where Nick ends up.
Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for being on. God bless.
Thank you for joining us today, and a big thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to this surgical exploration of politics, healthcare, and life. I've been your host, Dr. Craig Green. Remember to stay informed, stay sharp, and join us next time to see which of life's topics we'll dissect under the knife.